We're in this series called Under the Microscope, and if you remember, we're talking about what? What is this series about? Science and faith. Very good. That's actually my next slide right there. Good. So you guys were paying attention. Good. That was a test. You passed. Congratulations. So we're talking what? Well, that's okay. That's okay. That you got teammates that helped you out there. There's no I in team. I used to hate it when people said that to me, but I find myself saying as an adult things I hated hearing as a kid. Does what? What? Oh, well, yeah, that's true. That's true. All right, so we're talking about science in faith. Like, here's the thing. We kind of laid the groundwork last week, talking about there's some different perceptions on this. And if you remember, there's something I feel like I articulated better second hour than I did first hour, and that was the idea of worldview. Did I talk about worldview very much with you guys? Sometimes I get a little mixed up what I said, what hour. But I explained it this way. Like, you guys, have you ever put on, like, sunglasses? And you know, it obviously, like, it makes it darker so that the sun doesn't hurt your eyes as much. But there's also different, like, shades of sunglasses. Like, some of them are, like, sepia, so it's, like, yellow. And some of them are, like, more vibrant colors. Polarized sunglasses. Some of them, it's like, think about it like if you're editing a photo and you put a filter on it. Like, it changes the way you see things. So when you talk about worldview and you're talking about, like, how to put faith and science in the same category together, because a lot of people have a problem with that. A lot of people in our world say science and faith don't go together. You can either believe in science or you can believe in a fairy tale God. And a lot of the conversation in our culture kind of perpetuates that idea and that conversation. But when it all comes down to it, it's less about competition, and it's more about your worldview. It's the glasses that you put on. It's more about how you choose to see the world. You can either see the world in such a way where there is no God, and you'll interpret science and the evidence we find in this world, the baking soda and the vinegar, where when you combine it, they kind of combust and explode. I loved chemistry class when I was in high school because I liked seeing how when you mix certain things together, what it does. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of exciting. And so I remember one of the times I told you last week, she did like the gas bubbles, and when she lit it on fire, it went like, woof, and like lit up the whole room. I would love to do that, but I might get in trouble. So also, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know if I would do the right ratios. So just start a fire, and then we can do it. Yeah, no, bad idea. But I love the idea of figuring how things go together, how different chemicals make different reactions and stuff like that. It intrigues me. Now, I don't remember a whole lot of it, but I remember I enjoyed it a lot. All right, there's things when you look around at creation. I love just going out and taking nature walks. I love going on hikes, especially in the fall, because all the trees are different colors. It's really beautiful out, and I just feel more connected to God that way. I'm not so hot because of the summer heat. It's more like fall. It's enjoyable for me, and so I enjoy that. I enjoy being around God's creation. Everything around me just makes me feel more connected to God, because as we talked about last week, there's a lot within creation that points to the Creator, and I think God has hardwired that within us. But when we look at science as something that can actually grow our faith, I think we open ourselves up to actually learning and experiencing more of who God is and the role that He can play in our lives. The bottom line is that science and faith are not at odds against each other. Science and faith actually go together quite well. But as we mentioned, not everybody sees it this way. Not everybody sees science and faith as something that goes together. What's something that you've heard somebody say before that makes it seem like you have to choose one or the other? Okay, the idea of evolution. We actually might come back to that. What else? Anything else? Jelly's gross, so peanut butter and jelly sandwiches should just be peanut butter sandwiches? Okay. Anybody else have anything to add about how, like maybe something that you've heard about how science and faith don't go together? I'll tell you one. I'll tell you one that I've heard. You can't trust the Bible because the Bible talks about people being raised from the dead. And we know, because of science, that people don't actually raise from the dead. Therefore, the Bible is false. You heard that one before? That's one that I've heard. That's a big one, because Paul talks about Jesus rising from the dead as being the actual foundation of our faith. And if that didn't happen, then our faith is meaningless. So that's a pretty important one. Maybe we'll come back to that. Okay, science says the meteor killed the dinosaurs, and the Bible talks about the flood. So maybe Noah had dinosaurs on the ark, and it was something else. Who knows? If you go to the Answers in Genesis thing in Kentucky, they have dinosaurs in the ark, don't they? I haven't been, but I've seen pictures. So, but that's something some people say, and it's who knows. Yeah, so there's the idea of God created versus evolution. That's another one. What evidence do they have of a meteor versus a flood? Is that something you've heard, or is that something you're asking me? Okay, cool. Right, exactly. The scripture about a flood, but not a meteor. Yeah. Yeah, so there's alternate explanations for past events from what the scientific community says and what our Bible says. Okay. Why don't we learn anything about a flood, like in your science class? Because schools don't take the Bible seriously. But if you look at Answers in Genesis stuff, they show lots of evidence of like things that have happened geographically and stuff around the world that can be explained by an earth-wide flood. And so it seems to give credence to the idea, if you listen to some of that stuff, that actually the flood is a pretty feasible explanation for a lot of the things that we see today. And they're what today? Oh yeah. That's you're talking about archaeological evidence to support the Bible. Yeah, they found a lot of that in science. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a fun Google search. Last one. Is what? The cross where Jesus... No, that cross is not there anymore. That was a custom that the Romans did. They would crucify people, and those crosses wouldn't stay put up for long periods of time. But the hill called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, that's still around. So we'll move on. But yeah, there's a lot of things that you can hear different things and that pull up different seemingly conflicts between what we study in the world and what the Bible says. Now, I think there's perfectly acceptable explanations for all those things that we've talked about. The one that I will touch is the resurrection one, because that's like the biggest deal, is like when scientists say, well, we know that people don't rise from the dead. Therefore, the Bible can't be true because it talks about people rising from the dead. And so, and that is like the biggest claim, right? That but if you come in, again, from a worldview or perspective, you put the glasses on that say, hey, God is behind everything, and you believe that maybe God designed the world that we see today, that means God has power over life and death. That means God created life out of nothing, out of no life, and it says he breathed life into Adam and Eve's lungs. So he spoke it, and it was so. So if God has the ability to create life, then it's actually not that big of a leap for Christians to think, well, then God could raise somebody from the dead too, because he can speak and life happens. So that's a Christian explanation to it. The scientific community would say, well, there's nothing in science that proves that can happen, or similar things. And that's where we go, yeah, that's because the miraculous, by definition, is supernatural. It means it happens outside of the natural world, outside of what we can study and observe. And we call that God. So that's the simple explanation for that. But you're right. There's lots of things that seemingly oppose science versus faith. So let's get into kind of our text for today. Now, if you remember last week, we read Genesis 1:1, and before we put it on the screen, does anybody know it by memory? Genesis 1:1? Boom, put that on the screen. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Yeah, give him a round of applause. That was good. We talked about that last week. So that is, Bible Bowl. Shameless plug. If you want to do Bible Bowl and study the Bible, then you should do that. It'll be good for you. Iwanas is good too. My wife did that. Yeah, cool. So in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's the narrative we hear from the Bible. That's what Christians have traditionally always believed, that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created life out of no life. He created something out of nothing. He spoke, and it was so, and he said that it was good. Well then, what the world tends to say is something different. How many of you guys have gotten to the point in class where you study Charles Darwin? Who wants to tell me who Charles Darwin is? Yeah, he's the one who came up with the theory of evolution. Yeah, that we originated from primates. That might be, I don't know the answer to that, but that his face was on the picture of a monkey. Maybe. But that was basically his theory, right? He was a scientist and he theorized, and this is in the realm of theory, so the evolutionary theory is still a theory. It's not proven, and you know why it's not proven? Because it's not true. Okay, yes, but technically you can't prove that God did it either. So, do you know what the definition of science is? Like what makes science science? Proposing a hypothesis is part of it. But how do we understand how things happen? By experimenting. So that's basically the answer. Science is something that can be repeatable and testable. Meaning you can repeat something and see it repeated and therefore test it and learn about it. And you can't repeat evolution because it already happened, right? Just like you can't repeat God creating the world again because it already happened. Like, this is called history. This is called past. So you can come up with theories for why something happened, and you have to take a leap of faith in whichever theory that you go for. So again, as Christians, we believe that God is behind it. Charles Darwin sought to explain the world without God, without a creator. And the only way you can do that is by theorizing how we got here by accident and natural processes. And so he actually wrote a book on the origin of species. Have you guys heard of this? So he talks about this theory. It actually created quite a bit of controversy back then, just like it does today. Because there's people who again, have a different perspective on life, a different worldview. Some people that think, no, there's an intelligent designer, a God behind it. There's a higher power behind what we see today, because it couldn't have happened by accident. And then you have people who's like, no, there's no such thing as the supernatural or as God, only what you can see and test and prove, and God doesn't fit in that category, and so they just don't see it, don't believe it. So why am I giving you this little mini science lesson here in church? Because Darwin proposed this stuff. It was controversial back then, but it's taught in your classrooms today, and it's still controversial today. You'll go to church, you'll hear one thing, and then you'll go to school and you'll hear another thing. You get on YouTube and you'll hear anything. So this is something that, like, for a lot of young Christians, and even older Christians, but specifically young Christians, this causes a tension point in their faith. They go, okay, well, if science says this, and this is provable and repeatable, then how can I trust the Bible because this is someone's word against what we can test and prove today? Well, you have to remember, again, what is testable and provable today? And so what is testable and provable today, there's a difference between microevolution and macroevolution. And do you guys know what this is? What was that? Macaroni and cheese? No. So macro, on a larger scale, macroevolution would be animals evolving from one species into another species in order to adapt to their environment. That was his theory of evolution. And so eventually we got to where we are in humans from another animal species that evolved over millions of years. Okay, that's but then there's microevolution as well. I might have those reversed actually. Microevolution, where it's subtle changes within a species. So like there's different breeds of dog. There's different types. There's the African elephant. There's the Asian elephant. There's different types of animals. There's all these different variations of bears that adapt according to their environment, and those could have evolved over time. But there is never, and that's testable and repeatable on some level today. Whereas being able to evolve from one species to another, that's not provable today. That's in the realm of theory. And your science class often doesn't teach you that. That it is theory. And that's not testable or repeatable today. We can't prove that. So his theory was that this had happened. And obviously Christians believe that, no, a creator created us this way. We didn't evolve from another species. There's no evidence of that today. And still in the first chapter of Genesis, this is what Christians believe, what makes us set apart, and why this is the biggest deal breaker that crushes the evolutionary theory for me and for most Christians. It says in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 27, it says this: Then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. And I think God uses the plural because there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And in John chapter 1, we see in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word became flesh. And that's talking about Jesus. So we believe that God was in all his forms at the beginning, potentially. And God had community within himself, which is why he wires us to have community. Anyway, that's a rabbit trail. But I always wondered that. Why is God pluralizing himself? Let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, all the wild animals on earth, and all the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And so human beings were created to reflect God's image. God doesn't say that about any of the other things that he created, only about humans. So then we read a couple verses later. It says, Then God looked over all he had made, and he saw that it was what? Good. But there's a specific word there. Very good. See, all throughout the days of creation, which we read last week, said morning came and evening passed on the first day, and God saw that it was good. But he gets to mankind made in his own image, and he said that it was very good. There's something unique about you and me, that we're created in the image of God. We are different. We are not here by accident. We have a purpose. And so here's what we need to take away from this is that, and I mentioned this briefly last week, but science answers the question how, or attempts to answer the question how. How did things happen? How do things happen? How do things work in our world today according to the laws of science as we know them? But the Bible isn't answering the question of how. Sometimes the Bible says stuff that pertains to the how, and that has no problem fitting in with most scientific theories today. But the questions that the Bible is answering is who and why. Who is behind creation? That'd be God. Who is made in the image of God? That'd be us. He's answering the who question, which is more important than the how question. Can we agree? How something works is really cool, and it can help enhance our faith in the one who created it, because it points to the creator, but the who is more important. And the why. Why did he create us? He created us to be in his image, to have a relationship with him, to be able to communicate in ways that animals can't. You and I are uniquely different, and we have an intrinsic value. That means that we are valuable as we are, no matter what, to our Creator, which is pretty awesome. The Bible's not answering the how. The Bible's answering the who and the why. And that's important to remember. So science and faith can work together to show us more about God. So, for instance, if I were to take this eraser here, there's something called the law of, let's see if you can guess it. It's kind of, but no. What's going to happen when I drop this? It's going to fall? Are you sure? How do you know it's going to hit the ground when I let go? Because of gravity. John Mayer, anybody? Sure. Probably before your time. Gravity is a real thing, okay? Oh my gosh. Gravity. Wow, look at that. Give that eraser a round of applause. Yeah. Gravity is a thing. Okay, so does the Bible tell us how it works? But can we believe it's a real thing? Okay, this is a super simple illustration, guys. We know that gravity is real because we see it and observe it. It's repeatable. Like, I don't let go, and sometimes you might wonder if it's going to float, but other times, sometimes you don't know if it's going to fall, if it's going to float. No, you know every single time, 100% of the time, it's going to hit the ground, right, when you let go. Do you think there's ever going to be a time where it's not going to fall and hit the ground if somebody lets go? If somebody were to let go 1,000,000 times from this spot right here, would it hit the ground every single time? Okay, so 100% of the time. We know that because of the law of gravity, right? That's the how, but why? Well, it's pretty simple. Yeah. Well, that's the how. That's the how the gravity works, the magnetic pull. The why. So we don't float away, right? Because that would be pretty difficult to live life if we're like trying to move, but we're just floating in the air, right? So like we would never get anywhere. We need to be grounded. That's a sermon illustration right there in of itself, right? We need to be grounded in something. Gravity grounds us to the earth so that we can live a sustainable life. Okay? The why is because God cares for us. He wanted us to thrive. But the how is answering a different question. The same goes with any scientific stuff that you're studying. There's a how, which science answers, and there's a why, which is we find from our biblical worldview and from God. So you're different because you were created with a purpose. This is unlike anything else in creation. What's the purpose? It's to know God, to love God, to reflect on God's image, or to reflect His image to the world, and to experience God's best for your life. Ultimately, and I'm going to try, wow, there's a spider web just floating right here. Wow, that I caught that in my eye, and that was kind of crazy. Okay, so is it gone? Okay, cool. If it comes back, well, I'm almost done. So I want you guys to have time in your group, so I'm going to wrap this up here. But because science and faith can work together to show us more about God. Because science and faith can work together to show us more about God. This is the reason that science and faith can go together. They work together to show us more about God. And so I don't want you guys to ever have to be afraid of like scientific questions or discoveries. Those are all cool and good. And you can be a scientist, and as we talked about last week, you can believe in science, and still that doesn't have to shake your worldview of God. So I know you have a question. I'll get to you in just a minute. So here's what I want you guys to think about this week as we kind of reflect on this and as you go about your weeks. One, you can ask how. Okay, science is good. You can ask how things work. Approach scientists like Darwin and other people and their discoveries the same way that we do with all things in science, right? What did they believe? What was the evidence they discovered? And then you interpret it for yourself, right? You always have to tell the difference between what's opinion and what's fact. And don't let that get blurry for you. So ask the how. It's helpful. Number two, ask the why. In order to make room for both science and God, we can't forget that what God says is the bigger picture. We have to understand it all within the framework of a God who is behind all things. So ask the why when it comes to things. And three, consider the way the how and why work together. That's kind of confusing. Consider the way how and why work together, because science is the how and the why is God. So science and faith don't have to be separated. They can help each other. They can complement each other, and they can help you grow as an individual in your faith and in your study of science. Science and faith can work together to show us more about God. So as you go to your groups, what's one question that you have about science and faith? I know you talked about some of them a second ago, but think about that question. I'm going to pray, and then you'll go to your groups, and we'll be done for the day. So